Greetings again, you all. Greetings again. This is another video that I'm making for you. Let's talk about some things that people don't like to talk about, okay? The thing that we need to understand is when you have an opinion and you put it on a public platform, you're going to be ridiculed and criticized, right? Because your opinion might offend someone. Just because the person is offended does not negate the fact that you're telling truth about some things. So on one of my videos, I was talking about parents or so-called parents not holding their children accountable for these behaviors that they're exhibiting in school. And so I had people to come into my comment section talking about how about help the child instead of blame him. How about help the child instead of blame him? First of all, if you listened to my live stream, I didn't blame the child. What I did was talk about the child's behavior and what he did. I said he ran down the hall as we were on our way to lunch. And why did he run down the hall? I don't know. Maybe that's for the parent to figure out. That's not my child. And like I said, that's not my responsibility to go chasing after a child when I have 20 some other children to escort to the cafeteria. That's number one. Number two, he's in 4th grade. So at this age, he's probably around 9 years old enough to know not to be running away from the class. Okay. And then on top of that, if he made it to the 4th grade, what happened in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd to where they pushed him to the 4th grade? So the accountability lies where? Not on I as a substitute teacher. Okay. So it told me that parents wanted to come into the comment section and get hypersensitive, more than likely because their children are exhibiting similar behavior. And instead of them using and reaching out to resources to help their children's behavior, they want to blame a teacher, a school staff member, or someone else instead of them going inward and seeing how they can help their own children. That had nothing to do with my situation that I was talking about at that particular school with that particular student. Okay, let's start there. And there are parents that are not accountable for their children's behavior. I've heard countless stories of how parents are going into parent-teacher conferences, speaking with school staff, and want to become defensive over their children's behavior. And understandably so, because that's your child. But then again, I don't understand it, because if you know that your child is causing an issue in class or in school, then what are you doing to remedy the problem? What are you doing to rectify it? You need to understand a school is not a babysitter facility or a daycare facility. A school is there to help your child learn, okay? And it's not just up to the staff members and the teachers to have your child to learn. A lot of that responsibility starts at home, which is what parents don't want to understand, because they're not really parents. They're people that just had children. They got pregnant and had children. And what we don't understand, what some of them don't understand, things that go on in the home and that home environment definitely impacts the child's behavior when they get into a public setting. So instead of blaming school staff, instead of blaming teachers, you need to actually look inward instead of outward. And people get hypersensitive, they get defensive, they get offended because they're frustrated with the situation and they want someone to take it out on. But what I am going to do is I am going to uphold for the teachers out there that are doing their best, teachers out there that are daycare workers, that are babysitters, that are nurses, that are counselors, that are coaches, that barely can teach because they're disciplinary. Okay, they are parents to your children. Do you know how many children come up to me and ask me to tie their shoes? How many children will come around during snack time saying, I don't have a snack, because the parent didn't pack a snack for snack time? How many children have told me after they have already eaten lunch that they're still hungry? How many children that will sit in class and say, I don't have a pencil? How many children that will sit in class and don't have notebook paper, don't have regular school supplies that usually are sent home with parents to purchase these things at the beginning of the school year. What's going on? How many children are going to the office because they have had an accident on themselves and don't have extra clothes? So I'm just trying to understand, if you're blaming the teacher, so is it the teacher's job to be the parent to your child outside of them being at your house? You want someone else to parent your child and teach your child, but you don't want the teacher to discipline your child, and you don't want to discipline your child. So when your child grows up into society, what do you think is going to happen when they reach 18 years of age? Do you think that the police officers are going to say, you know what? I understand that you are dealing with X, Y, and Z, but let me go ahead and just cut you some slack. That's not going to happen. And a lot of these parents out here that call themselves parents don't really grasp the idea of what a teacher goes through on a day-to-day basis, because they're not even coming into the school for the parent-teacher conferences, yet alone coming to sit in the classroom to see what happens in a classroom setting. They don't want to observe their own child's behavior. So it is very easy to critique. It is very easy to criticize and ridicule if you're not dealing with 20 to 30 children in a classroom setting. And let's mention this. There's no other support, no other backup. You might have 2 or 3 children at home. You might even have 4 or 5 children at home. Now I want you to compare those 4 to 5 children to 20 some children, and being responsible for the safety of all of them. So before you sit there and ridicule these teachers, before you sit there and become defensive and hostile with school staff, you need to really start volunteering at these schools. Why don't you go in there and help the teacher? Because I'm pretty sure the schools could use your help. And it's very easy to work in a school, but a lot of parents are not going to do that. And let's get into these quote unquote so-called parents that like to send their children to school knowing they're sick, knowing they have runny noses, they're sneezing, they're coughing, and some of them have fevers, because you don't want to miss a day out of work, or because you just don't feel like dealing with them and you feel like the school is a babysitter for your child. They come to school and cough on other children that are sitting at their table. Those children start coughing and start getting sick. And in turn, who do you think gets sick? Yes, the teacher and the school staff. So now you have teachers that have to call out. Now you have substitute teachers that are going into these classrooms with a multitude of children with runny noses and coughs. And what happens to the substitute? They get sick, because it has happened to me. That is inconsiderate behavior. That is selfish behavior, and is unkind behavior. If you know your children are sick, keep them at home. Stop sending them to school sick with fevers and temperatures and runny noses. That is very inconsiderate, very selfish. You need to figure something out for your child. It is not fair to the teacher, it's not fair to the staff, and it's not fair to the other children. Another thing, if you know your child has behavior issues that are uncontrollable, it is not fair to the other children in the classroom that want to learn that your child is causing a disruption every single day. And it is hard for these children to listen and hear and pay attention to the teacher because your child is unruly. That is not fair, because there are a lot of children out here that are excelling and want to learn. And if I were a parent and my child were in the same classroom setting as your child, I would be highly upset that they would have to be in that type of environment. School is not a daycare center. School is not a babysitter facility. Let's get that straight. And there's only so much that a BMT can do with the child. So putting a Band-Aid on it and sending them back to class is not going to eradicate the situation. If you are not practicing discipline at home, you are part of the problem. If you're not reading to your child every day or every other day at home for at least 30 minutes a night, you are part of the problem. If you're not checking your children's homework or going over their schoolwork and making sure they know how to count, you are part of the problem. And if you're sending your child to school in kindergarten and they don't know how to spell their name, you're part of the problem, because you're not even getting them prepared for school. At this point, you're just dropping them off and moving along with your day. That is not parenting, you all. And I have to say that because part of parenting is teaching your child as well, along with the teacher. Keeping up with their homework assignments, not going on vacation in the middle of your child trying to learn new material for the curriculum, knowing they have testing, but you want to go to the Bahamas and they're already failing in class. That is not parenting, you all. These are the words of Brown Girls Are Beautiful. I endorse this message. If you are hypersensitive and offended, click off. I don't care, but don't comment anything stupid under my video because you're going to get a response that you don't like. All right, you all, I am advocating for the real teachers out here, and I understand why teachers are quitting. People have asked me a number of times, oh, don't you want to be a teacher? Because they see that I handle children really well, and one of the school staff members made a comment yesterday. She said, oh, you're here today to teach. I was there with first grade. She said, oh, the children are actually going to learn something today, because she has seen from sitting in the classroom settings with me compared to other substitute teachers, they sit there and they don't care if your child knows how to do anything. They just there to get paid for the day. They don't care. But when I'm there, the children are actually engaged. So one of the children had a problem, a behavioral issue. And he's really good with his work, but he has behavioral issues, and his mother's a teacher right across the hall. So she was checking up on him, and I said, well, he's doing really well. But when we came back from lunch, he had, like a mental breakdown. So I sent him across the hall to go be with his mother. And then, he came back and he was okay, but he was still hyperactive, y'all. I say all that to say is because she's taking accountability for her child, and I can tell that she spends a lot of time making sure he understands how to read and write and spell. All right. There's a difference with the parents that actually put in the effort compared to the parents that don't put in the effort, because it shows on the children. Also, while he was out, we were going over double digit addition, right? A lot of them, this was a new concept for them, but they actually were engaged and excited about it. So when he came back to the classroom, one of the other little boys told him, oh man, you just missed all this good stuff. He was so excited about going over math, and it just makes me feel so good when I see how excited they get, how their faces light up, how they are so happy that they are understanding and getting the right answer. Y'all, that is a very rewarding feeling. So I say all of that to say that if you want to come into my comment section with unruly comments, it has no bearance and no credence over here, because I am probably doing more for these children that you're doing for your own child. And that's why hit dogs are hollering in my comment sections. All right. This is a word from Brown Girls Are Beautiful. Continue to walk in your divinity. And like I said in my channel description, it does take a village to raise a child. So the person that said you don't live up to what your channel description is, forget you, okay? Because obviously you're not living up to the description of what your life is supposed to be. And with that, y'all, I'm closing out. Continue to stay blessed. Remember to celebrate yourself, because if you don't, who else will? And I will tune in with you all later. All right, bye.